It's time to say goodbye to the first build on the channel, the $1,000 BMW F10. I already have the next car lined up for the YouTube channel. I'll give a little teaser of what it is, and we'll see if anybody can guess what it is in the comments. But the next video will be that announcement. For now, let's go over what we all did to this BMW and how much it cost. I bought the BMW for $1,000 straight from a car repair shop's parking lot. It was non-running and driving, and based on how the engine sounded when I was cranking it over, I feared the worst. In the first video, we started by diagnosing to see if it was something very easy to fix. I started straight away with a compression test just because the engine sounded so terrible, and we had quite the range of compression, ranging from 0 in cylinder 1 all the way up to 185 PSI in another cylinder. At this point, I still didn't know what was wrong with the engine to cause the low compression issue, but I decided that it would be best to just pull the engine and transmission out of the vehicle just because the engine bay was so caked in oil. It was absolutely disgusting to work in, and I wanted to give this thing a thorough cleaning that it deserves. So that's what we did straight away in video 2. We took the bumper off, the crash bar, all of the coolers, disconnected the front axles and all of the wiring, and pulled the engine and transmission straight out of the front. At this point, I've had every tool that I needed except for one tool to pull the engine out, and that was a $55 tow hook that connects to the front of the engine to give you a lift point. Straight away in video 3, we took the transmission off of the engine so we could get it on an engine stand to begin teardown. In this video, I had to spend $215 on a couple tools, including a timing locking kit and some really long torque sockets to get to the head bolts. I started by tearing down the bottom side of the engine so I could take a look at the bottom end. I didn't see any issues, so I went straight to the top. Right when I took off the valve cover, I saw that our intake cam phaser was no longer attached to the intake camshaft. The bolt had snapped clean in half. After further disassembly, I found that the intake camshaft was seized to the head due to oil starvation. The huge downside here is that the intake camshaft rides on a ledge that is built into the head. So I couldn't just replace some bearings and replace the intake camshaft. I had to buy a whole new head. That ends video 3 with us completely tearing down the engine and finding our issue. And then I made an enormous list of all of the parts I needed to order to start reassembly. Video 4 is where I spent most of the money on the build. I had to spend $55 on another tool to lock the flex plate in place to take off the crankshaft bolt. I bought a used head and used cam phasers off of eBay for $1,050. And this enormous pile of parts cost $3,100. That includes things like gaskets, filters, spark plugs, bolts, sensors, timing chain, engine mount, etc., etc. Before we started with engine assembly, the engine bay, the block, the oil pan were all so disgustingly caked in oil. I started by cleaning those. This will not only make the car easier to work on in the future, but will also help find any new leaks that pop up along the way. On top of cleaning the engine bay, the oil pan, and the block itself, as we were assembling the engine, any old part that I was reusing, I of course cleaned as well before I put it back on the engine. Engine assembly went super smooth all the way up until the end when I was checking our timing after fully assembling the block, and we were hearing a little bit of a clunk noise from the exhaust cam phaser. I ended up buying another 2 used cam phasers, re-put those on, and we were making the same noise. So after doing a little bit of digging, I found out that this noise will just go away once the engine has oil pressure, and it definitely did. That's where I ended video 4 with that clunking noise, and I started video 5 with putting on those 2 new cam phasers and finalizing the engine assembly by putting on the valve cover, the turbo, all of the front accessories, and the engine harness. After the engine was fully assembled, we put the transmission back on and we threw it in the BMW easy peasy. At this point, I was super excited to get the engine running for the first time and hearing if I did everything correctly. So I wired up the rest of the engine bay, kept our spark plugs out, kept our fuel fuses off, put oil in it, and cranked it so we had oil pressure built up before our first start. I immediately put the spark plugs back in, put our fuel fuses in, and here was our first start. Let's go! It took a little bit to start, but that was just because we had no fuel in the fuel rail. Right when we got fuel pressure, it roared to life and sounded amazing, and I was ecstatic. My excitement didn't die down. It went through the roof because I knew we were close to driving it. I immediately began finishing up the engine bay with the reservoirs, the front coolers, the front bumper, the air filter, filled all the fluids, and we went for our first drive. Our first drive did have a little bit of a hiccup. I forgot one bolt, and that bolt held on the transmission cooler lines. The transmission cooler lines popped off. I leaked all my transmission fluid out on the street. My loving wife came, towed the car home. Luckily, I didn't make it too far before the transmission cooler lines popped off. I immediately put that one bolt back on, got new transmission fluid, filled it back up, and we went for our second first drive. This time, no issues. It drove fantastic. It felt fantastic. I was on top of the world. At this point, we had a running and driving BMW F10, but it wasn't very driver friendly, and that was because the interior was absolutely disgusting. The previous owners destroyed it with all sorts of things. They smoked in it, they spilled energy drinks all over, coffee, they had children in the back seat that looked like they just dumped everything on the floor. I don't know how they stained the headliner. They must have threw it up in the air, but we cleaned it all, and the before and afters were amazing. I really think you guys should go check out the detail video. It turned out amazing. I loved doing it. It was hard work, but the result was outstanding. Besides the interior, we of course gave the outside a clean, and we gave the engine bay a clean just because that thing was covered in layers of dust that I've never seen before. The detail video, we did spend a little bit of money on detail products, but those can be used on other vehicles, so I didn't dedicate them just to this build. I will leave the detailed products that I used in the description. What I will include for price in this video is we replaced our fog light for $200. We replaced the trunk springs for $160. And my favorite part of the transformation is I lowered the BMW on some H&R lowering springs for $425. In my favorite video of the series, number 7, the last video we did, the performance video, we started off by doing some draggy tests to get a baseline stock times in the quarter mile. After getting our baseline times, we upgraded the intercooler for $500, our downpipe for $430 with some VR Speed Factory parts. We tuned our ECU with an MHD tune for $550, and we tuned our TCU with an XHP tune for $370. At the same time, I wanted to fix our squeaky accessory belt, so I replaced the belt, the pulleys, and the tensioner for $155, and I fixed the check engine light by replacing the EVAP pump for $70. Ending video 7, the finale, the performance video with the after draggy times. All right, here we go, pull number 1. Woo. Oh, see that? Just pulls even when it's shifting. Oh, hell yeah, dude. Oh, you guys. Oh, 1.2 second increase. That's nuts. We improved our quarter mile and our 0 to 60 mile per hour by 1.2 seconds, and we improved our 60 foot by 0.3 seconds. I was very, very happy with the performance video. We improved more than I thought I would. The car was so much more fun to drive. It really transformed the BMW. I highly recommend anybody with a BMW F10 that just wants a little bit more out of it. For $1,800, the 2 performance parts and the 2 tunes transform this thing beyond belief. I can't recommend it enough. And finally, we can go over the totals. I, of course, spent $1,000 on the car. All of the repairs, even beyond the engine rebuild, including the fog light and the trunk springs, totaled to $4,150. That includes the $1,050 we spent on the head, and the rest of the $3,100 on everything else. For tools, I spent around $325 for BMW specific tools, some even only specific to the N55. And finally, on performance parts, I spent around $2,300. That includes the downpipe, the intercooler, the lowering springs, and both of the tunes. That brings our total for the BMW F10 build to $7,775 US American dollars. Please note that all of these prices include tax and shipping for my area, so the prices could go up, the prices could go down, but I highly doubt that, because of inflation. So there we have it, the BMW F10 build finished for $7,775. I'm hoping, I told you guys I would tell you how much I think I'm gonna sell it for. I'm hoping to get $13,000 out of it. That seems to be what they're going for in at least my area. And finally, before I end the video, a little hint of the next vehicle that's gonna be on the YouTube channel. Super excited for it. It's going to be amazing. The next car is not a BMW, but it kind of is. And that's literally all you're getting for a hint. You'll see it in the next video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all of the things. It helps me more than you know, and I'll see you in the next one.